those are the two parts that we're going to run. Please just interrupt at any time. So if you've got a question, it's usually that you'll have a thought at that moment, so feel free to ask as we go. There are a number of exits in our lovely building. You can get out through that door there. In the event of emergency, you can go out through the front door. There are toilets just round this bulkhead and to the left-hand side if you need to use those during the evening. We are live streaming this session, so for those in the audience, just be aware that we are recording for those who can't get here and might wish to watch. I'm also aware that some of the people who are here can't necessarily stay for the entire length of the presentation, and so just feel free to leave if you need to. Big welcome to existing councillors who are here amongst those that are thinking about standing. So it's great to see a mix of people thinking about the council. So I just want to start with local government and the act called the Local Government Act, which defines the purpose to enable democratic local decision making and action for communities and to promote thriving communities. We've worded that really carefully because the government is in the process of amending the legislation, and you might have seen some talk around the well-beings. At the moment, the Local Government Act includes 4 well-beings, being social, economic, cultural and environmental, but the government has signalled they want to take those well-beings out, and the intention of doing that is to encourage councils to focus on what they call the basics, whatever that means. So that legislation we expect to actually drop at the end of this month. So as soon as the 30th of June, we might get a look at that. So in the meantime, in terms of this evening, we're just describing the local... Just come on in, you're very welcome. We're just describing the Local Government Act in those kind of simple terms. There are some key terms in there: enabling democracy, so councils are democratic, they're elected, they're accountable to their communities for what they do. You do have the council has the role of making some key decisions, supporting their communities to thrive. So there's a whole host of ways in which councils can choose to do that, some of which I want to cover off briefly tonight in the context of the Ashburton District Council, because each council can do it slightly differently within the constraints of that legislation. So what's local government all about? Clearly we have services and activities. We try and set some strategic direction for the things that we do and the community in general. We love to engage the community. This is an example of reaching out and having the community directly engaged. Council does spend a lot of time advocating, particularly through the Mayor's office. So expressing this community's views on a whole raft of things that might be important. We do pass our own regulations and bylaws, and we have responsibility alongside particularly the Environment Canterbury for environmental management. We do come under a lot of scrutiny. The public is interested in things the council does, and councillors and mayoral candidates need to understand that scrutiny is quite real, and the community expects you to be available and seen to be doing the things that are important. Interestingly enough, we've referred to one act, but there's actually about 125 pieces of legislation, from the Resource Management Act to the Building Act to the climate change legislation, a whole host of laws that council needs to take into account. One of the key documents that council prepares is the long-term plan, and that sets the strategic direction for council over the next 10-year period. We have to redo it every 3 years, so we're continually in a process of re-evaluating the long-term plan, or the LTP as we call it, but it is a 10-year document. It talks about the things we're going to do, talks about the financial implications of those things. It is a document that we consult on, so the community gets to have a say on the things that are important to it via that long-term plan process. That's all good. Some stats about the Ashburton district. So our population is estimated to be 36,800. Between 2018 and 2023, we grew by about 10%. That's across the district. Different parts of the district do grow at different rates. Our median age for the district is about 40.1 years, and that means that we have a slightly older population than other parts of New Zealand. The national average is 38. Our median household income is 85,000, whereas nationally it's 97. So as much as some people tell me that Ashburton is an affluent community or an affluent district, the average income earned here is less than the national average. But you can see costs are sometimes a bit cheaper, and the median weekly rent is $300 compared to a national average of $450. So one of the things that tells us is that we are our own district, and sometimes the things that we see and the way in which we represent that district needs to be focused on us and not based on national averages. In Ashburton District, 68% of households own their own home. That's slightly higher than the national average of 66. In terms of our population, the Ashburton Township, 20,300. So a little over half of the district's population is in the Ashburton town. The next two biggest communities being Methven, just under 2,000, and Rakaia at about 1,500. And then the bulk of our community, 14,000, live in the surrounding rural areas. In terms of our where people in the Ashburton district were born, 81% affiliate as European, Asians 9%, Māori 8.6%, Pacific peoples 6%, Mila, which is, I always forget, but the last bit is Latin America. Middle East and Latin America. Thank you, Tony. And other ethnicities 1.3%. So you can see that we do have about 80% of the population say they are European, but there's a significant group that are starting to express a different ethnicity, and we've seen, in particular, the Asian population grow really quite rapidly. One of the reasons too for our diversity rests around the way in which the Filipino community has embraced Ashburton District, particularly around work with the dairy industry. In terms of this council, the Ashburton District Council, we were formed in 1989. There was a major shake-up of local government in New Zealand in 1989. This district was formed by the merger of the Ashburton Borough and the Ashburton County. We're deemed, in New Zealand's terms, to be described as a large provincial council. This council employs over 300 people, many with part-time types of roles. So we have 224 full-time equivalents. And we have a whole host of activities ranging from some which are a little bit smaller than others. Our largest single activity is roading, and that is where we invest most of the biggest single piece of our money. So if we think about the activities that Council does, there's probably three main ways of describing it. The first one is infrastructure. That's where we do spend the bulk of our budget, both operationally but also our capital spend. This includes drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, stock water, rubbish collection, and of course our roading network. So let me talk a little bit about that to give you some context. In terms of our water services, about 12,000 homes and businesses in this district are on the public supply for drinking water. We have about 500 kilometres of drinking water pipes, 200 kilometres of wastewater pipes, much smaller urban stormwater network, and we still have about 1,400 kilometres of stock water races. Council is in the process of is exiting that service in the next couple of years, but we have about 1,400 kilometres. I think 20 years ago it was about 2,500 kilometres, so it has gradually been closed over the last decades. In terms of roading, we call it transportation, but essentially it's about roading. We've got over 2,500 kilometres of roads in this district, and that is high. On various ways of measuring that, this district is described as anywhere between 3 and 5th longest roading network of any council in New Zealand. We're not the 3rd biggest, we're not the 3rd wealthiest, but we have the 3rd biggest roading network. So it's a critical piece of infrastructure that we need to manage. And included in that network is about 189 bridges, 260 kilometres of footpaths and nearly 100 kilometres of cycleways. We resell each year over 50 kilometres or more than that now, with a little bit of extra money going in. And last year we repaired something like 6,200 potholes. Sadly, the one you're most interested in is not yet repaired, but we are busy repairing potholes constantly. And as most of you will probably know, water is the enemy of roading, and wet weather is the worst possible thing that can happen to our roading network. In terms of waste reduction and recovery, so this is our rubbish service by any other name. We pick up waste and recycling from around about 11,500 households. We're now diverting about 20% of household waste into recycling. A figure that we spend a lot of time thinking about, because the more that we don't have to put in the landfill, the longer the landfill will last and the lower the cost. So there's a lot of attention on recycling. And for those that want to drop off their own stuff at the resource recovery parks or the rural drop-off points, we pick up or collect around about 10,000 tonnes. The second category I want to refer to is public services. Public services include things like the decision-making, the governance function, the council itself, if you like, the work that the council does. Around about 2,600 submissions from the community in the last year. We have a grants function, so we gave out nearly $1 million in grants and funding. We made 15 submissions to various pieces of legislation or other policy that either the government or someone else was doing that we thought was important to have a say on. And we have a whole suite of policies, plans, strategies, and we reviewed and developed 8 of those over the last year. So that's the governance in action, if you like. That category also includes community services. We've got 41 public toilets throughout the district. We've got just over 100 elderly persons housing units, and we support about 20 reserve boards and hall committees throughout the district, largely in the rural area. We also have an activity called economic development. This covers a number of things, but includes for us our property portfolio. Last year we sold around 10 hectares of rural land and nearly 2 hectares of commercial properties. A big piece of work managing all our leases. So there's 900 odd leases and licenses for various council-owned property that someone else is accessing or using. And it takes a big effort to maintain and keep those up to date. We also deliver visitor or tourism promotion through a brand called Experience Mid-Canterbury. And we have an events person who helps with the community events, and the most obvious of which has been the recent glow in the park. This last one in the Domain, I hope most people managed to get down there. One of the 3 nights it was open attracted just under 60,000 people across the 3 nights, and is starting to have a real reputation as being something as a must-do. And I know people from Christchurch, Timaru and everywhere in between that make the trek to Ashburton just for that event now. We also include parks and open spaces. Some councils call this parks and reserves. That for us is 440 hectares of parks and open spaces, 270 hectares of sports fields across the district. There's around 30 playgrounds across the district, and we have around 16 cemeteries which we manage. Some are bigger than others, but they're all important to us. And then finally in this category we would talk about our recreation facilities. So many of you will be familiar, I'm sure, with the EA Network Centre, where that's at the indoor courts, gym and swimming pool and aquatic facilities. We have a quality art and museum facility on the other side of State Highway 1 called the Ashburton Art Gallery and Heritage Centre. And of course we've got this beautiful new library here in Te Whare Whakatiri that the community has responded massively to and is thoroughly enjoying, which is wonderful. I think the third category of activities we can group as under a heading called regulatory. So this is where we issue building consents, code of compliance certificates, resource consents, subdivision plans. If you're interested in a property and you need a limb or a PIM, this is where this is. We've got nearly 7,000 dogs in the Ashburton district, which should be registered once a year. And of course, we respond to a whole host of animal control requests from dogs that are wandering right through to stock that gets out, or a whole host of other issues in that regulatory space. We also need to respond to noise control or public health and then the function of liquor licensing. So this is where we try and have an environment where the access to liquor is controlled and calm. So that's sort of kind of what we do. I'm not sure if there's any questions around that at this point. Sing out, it might be reasonably obvious, you might understand and know all that to be true, but some of those stats are quite interesting to give you a sense of the scale of the things that we do. But I'm not seeing any hands shoot up, so that's good. I'm particularly delighted none of the existing councillors are yet asking questions. That's a good sign. So if you think about all of that, and it costs, of course, it costs money, and councils are very mindful of the costs of those services and spend a lot of time talking about, thinking about, and trying to balance costs with the community demands. You can see from that graph that transportation or roading and water takes up about a third of our expenditure. So that's the scale of those issues for our budget. And then through the property, parks and reserves, and parks and open spaces, and regulatory and the other services, you can see the decreasing level of the pie that is those activities. We break our expenditure up into two categories, so capital expenditure or CapEx and operating expenditure or OPEX. CapEx is essentially renewing or upgrading existing assets or building new assets, largely funded out of depreciation, though often depreciation is insufficient, and there are other funding mechanisms open to us, particularly around raising loans or debt. And we do get some income from third parties, sometimes around development contributions for new development, and subsidies from New Zealand Transport Agency, Waka Kotahi. Just in terms of the CapEx, our net borrowings forecast for the 25-26 year, so our financial year starts 1 July, are forecast to be $166 million at the end of 30 June 26. Which equates, so we have measurements to manage the debt limits, making sure that we are raising debt to a sensible level. That equates to about 180% of total revenue. Our cap is 250%. So we can see that even though our debt's expected to increase by 30 million over the next 12-month period, we're still well within the covenants and the debt cap levels that council imposes on itself, and imposes with the blessing of an organisation called the Local Government Funding Agency, which is where we borrow our money from at rates cheaper than the rest of the market. In terms of operating expenditure, you will see that targeted rates and uniform annual general charge, which is just a rate but charged not on your property value but on per household, equates to, and I'm looking desperately to see if I can add those two up on a graph I can't quite read, so 54% of council's operating revenue is rates, And so that's often a number that is quite surprising to people. Ratepayers feel perhaps that often that they're 100% of council's operating business, but in fact it is a little bit less than that. Fees and charges are important, government subsidies are important, and we do have the odd investment and we get interest and dividends from those. Actual interest. Yeah, might be closer to 60% if I take into account that other wee piece of the cheese. But it's not 100% is the issue. There's a lot of other revenue sources that are important. OPEX for us is the day-to-day running of the council. So collecting the rubbish, turning on the street lights, mowing the lawns, issuing building consents. Our total rates take next year is around $53 million. Just thought it'd be worth just briefly talking about our financial position. We do have a credit rating. Fitch is not as well known as Standard & Poor's, but they are a global rating agency, and they give us an AA+ rating. And largely that's based on their perception of the community's ability to pay the rates that we need. So that's definitely a rating for council, and we need to be well run and improve a lot of our systems as well, but it's also a reflection of the community that we are part of. Nearly 1.2 billion in total assets, 158 million in debt, OPEX spend of around 70 million, CapEx of around 36. So that's the sort of the size of council financially. Okay, if I just give you a glimpse at our total external debt, because it's an interesting graph from the point of view that it's not all just straight lines. And we have conversations at the council often about levels of debt. So what's a sensible level of debt? What can the community afford? What does it mean we can do now but can't do later if we raise debt? So you can see here that we're well within the debt limits, but the big spike, 26-27, is essentially planning for the new bridge. So in our long-term plan, we expected to have to pay for that ourselves and get subsidy. But the deal that we've subsequently done with the government is that they are going to pay for the bridge itself, and it'll be a state highway, and we have to build the road that connects it from Graham's Road to Carter's Terrace. And so our debt won't actually look like that, but at the time we did the LTP, we had the issue of paying for the entire project, including the bridge. So one of the curses of the timing of these planning documents is they never quite sit with the decisions that we receive. The timing is critical. I thought it worthwhile just thinking about some of the challenges, so some of the big things that we're currently working on. I'm sure you will have heard about Local Water Done Well. This is the government's drinking waste and stormwater reform program. This council, following consultation with the community, has decided to form its own business unit. We're calling it SABU for the want of a better name, which stands for a standalone business unit. That essentially means the water services are going to stay inside council. Some councils are setting up separate companies. Some councils are setting up separate companies with other councils. But this council has decided to set up a business unit inside council. It's probably the reform option that has the least change than other options, but we know that it will still require a different way of thinking to deliver the infrastructure upgrades that are required. We've got, for the first time, we're going to have the Commerce Commission regulating water, and we've not got much familiarity with the Commerce Commission, so that's going to have an impact. And there's ever-increasing standards, particularly in the drinking water and wastewater space, and probably stormwater to come, that we need to respond to. So we're grappling with all that. We have to get that implemented. We've got to get our plan approved, and then we have to implement that over the next 18 months or so. So that's been a big piece of work and continues to be so. We are very conscious of the roading program. We know it's right around New Zealand. Roading attracts a lot of comment from the community. We do our very best with limited resources. We never seem, we simply don't have the money that we would like through the subsidy program to spend on our roads, but we have to stretch that as far as we can. And also I think it's important for candidates to think the big road between the middle down the east coast, is State Highway 1, is not a council road. We don't do anything with State Highway 1. So when you see a pothole, all those potholes that opened up just on the north side of Ashburton a couple of weeks ago, before you even got to the golf club turnoff if you're heading north, that's not our responsibility. That's central government's. And sometimes the frustration with the state of the roads spills between the government and council when one or the other of us actually has got a different responsibility. So the state highways in our patch are State Highway 1 and the road from Ashburton to Methven. Those roads are not council's roads. We don't maintain them, we don't repair them, we don't do anything except drive on them like everyone else. All the rest of the roads are ours. And about half the network's sealed and about half unsealed. So we've got a different maintenance program for the unsealed roads. Big one for councillors, big ones for those that are standing for council or mayor, is balancing affordability versus expectations. And so when you come to an annual plan or a long-term plan, which is where we set our budgets in consultation with the community, we get inundated with rock and hard place. We get inundated with people wanting services, wanting us to keep something, wanting us to improve something, wanting us to do more, at the same time as telling us the rates are too high and we need to pay less. And those two things are very difficult to balance, and that's the art of being an elected member. It's the art of the mayor and the councillors, where from all the things they know and all the people they talk to and all the knowledge they have is balancing the expectations with affordability. Improving our resilience, we know one of the strong motivations to build the second bridge or get a second bridge across the river close to Ashburton is the way in which the State Highway Bridge responded in 2021 when we had the floods and the pier sank and the bridge is closed and suddenly people can't get from Timwood to Ashburton to live their normal life across schools and work and health and all the rest of it. A major disruption, but also a huge economic disruption to the South Island. And I remember quite clearly that event, and we were hearing that Dunedin supermarkets are running out of bread because the State Highway Bridge here was closed. So that's a big piece of resilience thinking. But we do a whole lot of other things. We've got a piece of work going on at the moment to try and understand the impacts of climate change on this district, and even planning for seismic events, thinking about, for example, if the Alpine Fault was to go, how would our community cope, what would we need in place? So lots of things around resilience, and resilience can be as simple too as the size of the pipe that you're replacing an old pipe with. Often we just do like for like because that makes sense and is probably the most affordable, but actually there was conversations even today at the council meeting about, well, wouldn't it be better to put a slightly bigger pipe in and be a little bit more resilient in the future while you've got the trench open. I've been in this role nearly 7 years, and it's been an extraordinary period for government changes. So the previous Labour-led government was proposing a massive range of changes, got some in place, we're still working through others, and this government the National-led government has come in, reversed a lot of that stuff, bringing in their own, tweaking some stuff, talking about a whole host of things. It's an extraordinary range of changes to the way in which the country is set up or operates, really. I know every sector I talk to would say the same thing. So changes in the public sector, changes in health, changes in a Ministry for the Environment, a host of changes, but councils are facing those as well. And we are trying to keep pace with all of that. We've also mentioned the specific one around the water quality at Lake Hood because it is so topical, and 3 years ago we wouldn't have even been talking about water quality at Lake Hood, but in the last 3 years we've had the algal bloom and the cyanobacteria, and it's a wicked problem. There is no easy solution, and I'm sure all the great ideas that we have will help, but there's not one thing that we've yet found that is going to fix it. There'll be a host of little things or a host of big things or a whole tranche of work. So Council's spending a lot of time thinking about Lake Hood and the water quality, and we have reached out to a woman, a scientist at Lincoln University, regarded as New Zealand's leading cyanobacteria expert, and she's just up the road. She's very interested in helping us, and so we're going to lean on her and some PhD students to try and understand how the lake is operating. We're going to trial some of the ideas. If I'd had $1 for every good idea that someone has sent to me in the last year, I'd be retired. Everyone around the world has got a great idea to fix Lake Hood, but sadly it's not that simple as their one idea. It's going to be a range of different things. So we're going to do some trials to make sure that we don't waste our precious money on things that won't work. All right, so looking at council itself, so that's the structure of council. So there is a mayor and 9 councillors, and we've got a Methven Community Board, not so relevant down here in Ashburton, but when I'm making this presentation next week in Methven, we will talk about that a little more. But the Methven Community Board essentially is a recommending board on behalf of the Methven community, and they make recommendations to council. The council itself is making decisions and allocating resources and then asking the organisation to get on with the work, and they do that through a whole host of plans and policies, and they do it through the chief executive, and the chief executive then turns to all the good people who work here to get those things done. And then, of course, we report back to council to let them know how we're getting on. I've talked about affordability with expectations. We can't emphasise that enough, and any of the councillors are already here will tell you that they'd love to be able to do some of the things that the community wants done, but in their view, the community can't afford it and do everything else. So you're trying to make those decisions. Our vision is to be the district of choice for lifestyle and opportunity. So we are trying to provide a district where people want to come and live, work and play, invest and play. And so council has to be strategic about the sort of things it focuses on. What's going to help achieve that vision is critical. So you're thinking about being an elected member, that's fantastic. We think there's probably 4 major roles. Representation and accountability. So if you are elected to council as either the mayor or a councillor, you will be representing your community, your neighbours, your friends, the people you've never met, will have an expectation that you're going to represent their views around the table and in decision making. That also includes accountability, so consulting the community, asking them what they think. And a big part of the role for the mayor and council is to refer ratepayers or residents to the services that they need. I can promise you, you will not be able to fix everything. And sometimes you just need to say, well, if you've got one of those, then here's where you need to go to try and sort it out. Because you won't have the time nor the capacity to fix it for them. But they're looking for advice, they're looking for support, they're looking for a way through the complicated society that we have. A second major role is strategy and policy making. So we bring to you a whole raft of different policies that dictate the way the staff might respond to a query about anything. The biggest single piece of policy really, or strategy, is the long-term plan. That's the 10-year plan that we talked about earlier. That's attempting to decide on the big things, set a direction over that 10-year period, and then we come and review that on every 3 years, but we also have an annual plan within that cycle to allocate budgets to work. You do have an important financial role, so councillors and the mayor are setting, allocating resources, really. In the office we can't do anything without a budget to do it, and you will set that for us. And I know all councillors and all mayors I've worked with take a keen, serious perspective on stewardship. So this district has got everything it's got because somebody has made a decision somewhere in the last 150 years, and you're managing that on behalf of the community, so the community's in great shape in another 150 years. I didn't turn the right page. And then the final one in terms of those roles is advocacy, and we've talked about the more obvious advocacy roles, which might be making submissions or speaking with MPs or going to Wellington and thumping desks or whatever it might be. But of course you're also advocating on behalf of the council, so if your neighbour asks you about something that council's doing, you have a choice. You can either bag the council, and we all suffer the reputation of that, or you can give some really good advice to that person as to why the council might be doing something in particular, and they'll be better informed, and our reputation will be enhanced. And of course, I'm no doubt you from time to time will feel warmly about something the council has done, and there'll be other decisions where you perhaps wish that it was different. So you get to choose how you represent the council in those opportunities. There are rewards though. Every councillor I've ever met gets a great deal of satisfaction and fulfilment from serving the community. It's a community service role. I think councillors do learn new skills. They learn about a whole host of things that you might not have the same depth of information in your ordinary lives. And I've heard a lot of comments, particularly when we might visit various facilities. The Rakaya sludge beds come to mind, where the stuff from the wastewater, the waste treatment plant gets to dry out. Well, not many people understand how that process all works unless you're part of an organisation that runs those facilities. A very small example, but there are new skills. There's meeting skills that you learn. There's how to influence and negotiate and advocate for your position with your other councillors to get decisions. There's things like, I like to think of disagree and commit. As an individual, you can rail against the machine or decisions you don't like. As part of a council, if a decision doesn't go your way, then you can think about how, well, I had my say, didn't win the argument, but the council's still doing this. How am I going to now position myself in relation to a majority decision? Everybody believes in democracy. Everyone believes the majority decision is the only way you can run a place. But sometimes those majority decisions won't be ones that you personally agree with. Again, you get to decide how to behave in those situations. So we've given this a little bit of thought in terms of what might make a good elected member. And of course, everyone does it a little bit differently. So these are not, there's no blueprint for a great mayor or councillor. But there are some things that you are likely to have if you're going to thrive as an elected member. You will have to listen and absorb a lot of information. Your community expects you to have an open mind and to see all sides of an issue before you come to a view. You will have to compromise. Democracy demands that you have to compromise. You will have to negotiate to try and achieve things that are important to you. Having a long-term view and seeing the bigger picture is helpful. Because sometimes we can dive into the detail and not seem to make much progress, but if you've got a long-term view, you see the bigger picture, the day-to-day battles are significantly less important. We say a clear vision, so know your why. Why are you standing? What do you want to achieve around that council table? And that can help guide you through the myriad of issues. You do need to be prepared to be public property. The community will know who you are, and they will expect to see you at things, to talk to you when you may not be ready to, and to be better known than you are now. Sometimes that has advantages, and sometimes you wish it wasn't true, but you have to be prepared for it. You do need some digital competency. By this I mean we have a vast amount of information. Most of it is coming electronically now, digitally, rather than paper. So you need to be able to cope with that world. Stamina, marathon, not a sprint. Stuff takes time. You need to be prepared to take the steps that are needed to get things done that you want to. Integrity, to stand for what you believe in. So you've got a clear reason as to why you want to be there and prepared to stand for that. And we find that people with a sense of humour cope better than the grumpy ones. I'm sure you've all got that in spades. So what might a week look like? I think the Mayor can expect to have some council work most days. That includes weekends and evenings. I don't describe it as full time. You don't have to come into the office 9 to 5 as the Mayor. You can choose to, of course, but you can expect to have some council business most days. The Mayor chairs a lot of meetings, so you need to develop some meeting skills as the chair, and you'll spend an amount of time meeting residents and responding to the concerns that they are expressing to you. The Mayor is the leader of the elected council team, so while the Mayor only has one vote and the councillors between them have the other 9, the leader of the team has the responsibility, if you like, of developing a cohesive group of 10 to get things done. And the Mayor will often be the obvious advocate for issues that are important to Mid-Canterbury or Ashburton, and the Mayor is our primary spokesperson for council, and sometimes that's advocating for obvious things, and sometimes a little less so. And I know that mayors that I've worked with have understood that role well, and sometimes they're advocating for things that they didn't support, but the council has supported it or disagreed with it, and as the voice of the council you have to be prepared to do that. In terms of a councillor, we would say that you're probably going to spend 2 to 3 days a week on council business. There's probably 2 days for various meetings and workshops. Some of those might be part days, but 2 days. And then you probably need a day a week to prepare. So we'll be sending you a lot of material, a lot of stuff to read, a lot of stuff to digest, and you will enjoy your time on the council if you are well prepared and read all the material that comes your way. And of course you are the ears and eyes for the district. You're the advocate for your community as well. As a candidate, so before you get there, if you decide to stand, and we're getting close to Anthony's piece of cheese now, but we are going to provide the opportunity to prepare a candidate video, so a short, he said, short video, answering a small number of election-related questions. They'll be up to 90 seconds long, filmed here by Janice's team here at council premises, and made available via our website for the community to see what you're all about. There's another organisation called policy.nz, and they are, while a private organisation, a non-profit, people who just want to enhance access to democracy, partner of our industry organisation called Local Government New Zealand. And they're going to have a thing called a Vote 25 campaign, and they're essentially a platform to list every candidate and every election, every part of the local government election, with who you are and what you stand for and a bit about yourself. It's voluntary, no one's going to make you do that, but I think there was over 3,000 candidates across New Zealand 3 years ago took advantage of getting their profile up on that website, and I think there's a couple of blokes running it out of their garage in Wellington somewhere. So it's a supportive democracy initiative. It's not some society that's looking to gain anything themselves from what they do. We'll also have a couple of Meet the Candidate sessions. So we will be running one here, I think, and one in Methven. Yeah, so that's where, and again, none of these things are compulsory, but once we know who the candidates are when the nomination period closes, then we'll have an opportunity for you to have a short say in the community, to come in and see what you're all about. We're going to talk a little bit about candidate safety as well, aren't we? Are we doing that now, or? Oh, there we are. Thank you. It was weird to place this in the presentation. And I think Anthony's going to cover it off a little more fully, but it does come with, being an elected member can come with some challenges. So that public property thing that we talk about does have some things to think through. One of those is increasing levels of online abuse. And there are elected members across New Zealand, and sadly particularly female elected members, who do face some quite unacceptable barrages of opinion from, we might call them fringe groups, but it doesn't really matter where they come from, that you get that. And our recommendation is that you need to acknowledge that, because and plan ahead to keep yourself safe. And the Ministry for Women, Nicola Grigg, just up the road, has released a toolkit in relation to online safety for elected people. It's for men and women, so it's developed by the Ministry for Women, but it's not a women-only thing. And have a look at that if you're thinking, if after this you still want to stand, have a look at some of those tips and tricks for keeping yourself safe online, because you'll get a lot of feedback and some of it will be inappropriate. There are a couple of tips. Campaign-specific social media accounts. So if you're already on Facey, then don't use your normal account. Set up one for Brian for Mayor and have that as your social media account, and that'll attract whatever attention it attracts, but it won't bleed into everything else that you do. We recommend setting up a separate email and a separate phone number for your campaign, and just to prevent it spilling into the rest of your life. At the very worst edge of some of this challenging stuff, when you're in public settings, just be aware of where you are, where the exits are, who's approaching, and if you do end up in a really difficult situation, you just need to stay calm. Don't. Nearly all the dreadful things around these confrontations happen when the tension escalates. So by far the best thing to do is to stay calm and agree if you have to, and keep yourself safe. This sort of pressure is illegal, so if you've got any threats at all and you're uncomfortable about anything, you by all means go immediately to the police. One of the things that we do to help that safety is when we publish the candidate contact details, so people can ring you about what policies you might have, we do not include your physical address. I think in the past we did from memory. In fact, it might have even been required, or we did it, but we do not do that now because we don't want the nutters coming around to your house. There are some really good tips on that Ministry for Women's website around keeping. The one I loved the most was Pauline Gillespie, who is a reasonably high-profile New Zealand woman, has a busy online media presence, and she's developed this term called post and ghost, So you still have your say, still contribute what you want to the public discourse about any issue that's important to you, but do not engage in comments and replies and answers and stirring things up. So she called it post and ghost. So there's a tip as well. Have your say and then get out of there. Just to pause again, really, it's kind of a wee bit heavy, isn't it? But it's real and you need to be ready. Are there any questions? No? Okay, that's good. So if you're elected, so you become a candidate, you go through the election. If you are elected by your community for either the mayor or councillor, some key things that we will then do for you. We're going to circulate in some material here through a candidate briefing paper around some key dates. We do run a pretty exhaustive induction process, so we don't just say, great, you're now the mayor or you're now a councillor. We try and give you as much information and help in those early months to be successful. We talk a lot to you about the legal place that you're in. There's a lot of things that are managed and controlled and out of your control because of the legal frameworks which we operate in. We also have some really good training opportunities through Local Government New Zealand, our industry organisation. Newly elected mayors and elected members have, we call them Mayor's School, but they have sessions in Wellington very early on, so in the first few weeks, where they encourage all new mayors and old mayors to come up to Wellington and chew the fat with each other and find out from someone who's actually been in the trenches what it's like, as opposed to the theoretical way we might talk to you. And we're here to help, so everyone in this council wants you to be successful once you're elected, and so we are here to assist you in terms of getting started and getting underway and finding your mojo and making the contribution that you want to make. Just my final slide before handing over to Anthony is where you can find out some more information. So we produce a pre-election report, which from memory I signed off maybe this morning. Yep, so that's done and will be available very soon. Maybe tomorrow, there we are. So, and that's just setting out some of Council's financial positions for you to mull over and some of the issues as the Chief Executive sees them. That's a report that I prepare. It's not adopted by Council or has their input. It's from the Chief Executive to the prospective new Council. So that's just been done. I'd urge you to come along or maybe at least watch some Council meetings between now and October. Most, or at least significant parts of our council meetings are open to the public, so you can come in to the Hine Parker chamber upstairs and sit down the back and just absorb it. But we also live stream over both Facebook and YouTube most of our meetings, or certainly all our public meetings. So you, again, just gets you a feel for the sort of issues and how you can see councillors behaving and how they contribute to the decision-making process. Our agendas are online and public documents, so you can read all about that. The LGNZ Candidates Guide is a really useful document. You'll know people in the community who might have previously been a councillor, or you want to get to know them, find out their perspective, what did they think, how did they find it, what were the pressure points and the rewards for them. And of all the myriad of documents that you can find online that we have, I urge you to at least read the LTP and this year's annual plan. That's the documents that are setting out the work program and the budgets attached to it. That's what this council has committed to doing over the next period of time, and understanding that as you come in will be a huge help to getting into the rhythm of the council process. That is me. So if you had any questions of me, maybe ask them now. Yep. Absolutely. I've ad-libbed a bit, so you might be able to point to, you didn't say that, but we're certainly happy to circulate the presentation, absolutely. Maybe in terms of that regard, we'll just need to know the names and where to send it to, so perhaps at the end of the thing, if you can come up and see us at the table here, and we'll we'll get that sorted.
Do you think the current model works to do with the amount of time a councillor puts into the role, or should it increase?
Should it increase? I think councillors and the mayor can put in as much time as they want to, really. So we think that's about what it takes to do the role well, to be well prepared. But you could do twice that amount if that's what you wanted to do, and presumably you could do a bit less by not reading quite as much or not being quite as well prepared. So yeah, I think the only there's I think it's Auckland and Christchurch where they regard councillors as full time. But I think for most of the rest of New Zealand, they are seen as being that 2 to 3 days a week.
Yeah, I think public awareness is probably for what's expected. Oh, sorry.
Oh, this is just for the make sure the live recording can hear you. Sorry.
What's expected of the council, a lot of people said to me, they're not available on Thursday, Friday, some of that, but looking at the model, they might actually require.
Well, it depends. So the 2 or 3 days a week might be on a day that's difficult for you. So we might say we're going to have a workshop on Thursday, and so that might clash with something else you thought you were going to do, and you've got to work out how you're going to manage those things. So the 2 to 3 days isn't necessarily all day Tuesday, all day Wednesday, and you can plan accordingly. It can spill across the week.
Yeah, the calibre of people we want, sometimes are running businesses themselves, and they're the people we want. So I think public awareness should be that this person runs a business, that's the calibre type of person we want in the role of councillor, so that we get the best of both worlds. And I think public awareness isn't probably quite what it should be as far as what they expect and what they know.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, in the end, the community will decide who they want to be around the table, and that's what democracy is. Yeah, yep. Sorry, at the back, Mark. Sprint.
Councillors in the room agree with that workload? That's what they're putting in?
Thank you.
Just wanting to know if the current councillors agree with that workload as it sits and stands, just so we're not making up anything.
On average, it is a good 2 to 3 days a week. Some weeks are more, some are less, but that would be the average. Like today, we started at 9 o'clock this morning, and we're still here now, some of us, and tomorrow is also all day, and that means you've yet to be prepared for those 2 days, so there's basically a full day's reading in that if you want to be fully prepared. So this week is a definite 3-day week. And that's without me having phone calls from other members of the community and other various things that happen as well, or other smaller committees you might be on that meet elsewhere from this building and they meet in the evenings and those sorts of things. So,
yeah. Did any other councillor want to confirm what Russell just said, or not?
Probably the other thing to realise is if you've got a meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning, you've got to get there because council starts dead on time. It starts at 10 o'clock full stop. So you've got to be there a quarter of an hour before just to give it time to get there. So I'm at Hinds, so it takes you half an hour to get here, quarter of an hour to get ready. So there's 9 o'clock. You might only have a meeting for an hour and a half or 2 hours, but you're not home till 1. So it's just this time to operate on either side of a meeting as well you have to factor in. But still, it's quite rewarding, so it's not all bad. It's not all bad.
And we do have facility to join meetings remotely. We do find most councillors prefer to join in person, for the collegial nature of the process. But if a councillor is unable to give the full amount of time with travel and everything else, they can join by teams. So I think we're getting general confirmation it's about right. Council itself sets the time of the day that it meets. So one of the things we get asked, and particularly, it might be someone running their own business, it might be a young mum, it might be a student, whatever the person's current status, if you like, is. And it would be easier, perhaps, if they could meet at night rather than during the day. I'm not advocating for that because you end up having some really long days, and I'm not sure that's best for decision making either. But my real point is that the council of the day gets to decide that. So the new council is elected with a mayor and 9 councillors, and they will decide then what their meeting schedule should look like. currently we meet two Wednesdays a month as full council at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's what this council decided to do. But it's not guaranteeing that that's what it is, just because the previous council did it. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for patiently listening. I will now hand over to Anthony. So he is focusing much more on the election than the role of council, but I think it'll be a really useful perspective for you to have as you contemplate your candidacy as well. Thank you.
Let's just test the technology. Can you hear me okay? Hooray, that's a good start. Kia ora koutou, and good evening everybody. As Hamish has indicated, I'm Anthony Morton. I'm the electoral officer for Ashburton DC for 2025, continuing on from 2022. And Hamish has given you the overview of the district and the council, how it's structured, etc. I want to take you through the election process, as in what you need to do to get yourself onto the voting paper for a start off, or to be considered as a candidate, and from that into the campaigning space and results and things like that. So more about the election process. In my case, I've got about 24-ish slides to work through. Some of it Hamish has already covered off, so we might be able to whip through some of those. Some of it is fairly heavy going, as in there's a number of bullet points on there. I'll try not to speak to every bullet point, but try and just give you a summary. As I go through that, it'll be a wee speed test, reading test for you guys, because you can do a quick whiz through of the bullet points yourselves. I'll try and then come in and just give you a summary of the important bits I think you need to be aware of. So, test the starting. This is where I really want to start, is where I fit in. How do we turn that off? So just to clarify, so elections.com is who I work for. I don't manage the company. I'm just one of the electoral officers there. We're one of two election management companies we're based in Christchurch, the other one is based in Auckland. And in any given year, we keep ourselves busy with election stuff, generally for private clients, for cooperatives, iwi trusts, power trusts, groups like that. So things where they don't need to go through company office requirements, we'll do election processes for them. Some of those elections are quite small, but we keep ourselves busy. And then every 3 years, the council elections roll in. And what's becoming an increasing pattern is the councils want an independent party associated with that, so they can remove themselves from any implications of interference, that sort of thing. So we've been engaged this time round for electoral officer functions for 44 councils. There's another 3 councils that we will just do some vote counting for. And down the bottom of that slide there is the councils that have engaged us. Top block is the city and district councils. Bottom line is the regional councils. In my case, I'm electoral officer for 17 councils and 4 regional councils. My colleague Warwick Lamp, who I will reference shortly, he's the electoral officer for the other 27 councils and the other 4 regional councils. So in my case, all of my councils are luckily in the South Island. So electoral team, in terms of who's going to be running things locally, it's going to be Philippa over here on my left, your right. So Philippa is going to be your local point of contact. She's got some other staff that will support her in her roles, but principally she'll be focusing on getting the nominations received and processed, and then once that part of the process is out of the way, then we'll move on to the voting side of things. So she will then organise special votes for those that haven't received voting papers or need to cast a replacement vote, etc. So I've also listed down the bottom there that my colleague's name, Warwick Lamp, he's going to be involved in the process after nominations close. So what he does is he sends out updates to the candidates once that nomination period is finished, and gives you updates on what's happening next, what the timeframes are for the next stage, that sort of thing. So just be aware of, you'll get some emails from Warwick and further down the track if you do put a nomination in. So for this one, this is where the buck stops, it's me. So the council engages elections.com. Elections.com have appointed me as the electoral officer, so I'm responsible for the delivery of the election. The principal focus at the initial part of it is to make sure people, or the candidates that want to stand, have got an opportunity to stand. So we'll try and provide a level playing field for that. And then once that nomination process is out of the way, that focus moves over to the electors, giving those that want to vote an opportunity to vote, principally through giving them some voting papers. The bottom point there, I do want to emphasise, we're widely considered to be some great referee that's going to control all the parties that are involved in an election. We're not, basically, so we make that point clear at this point. There's very few levers within the legislation that we run the election under that controls the campaigning space, and I'll cover that off in some later slides. But it's just to be aware that generally the campaigning side of things is left to the candidates. We have specific requirements to make sure that there's some authorisation statements on some of your campaigning material, in fact all of your campaigning material, and things like you're not using imitation voting papers, things like that. Again, cover this off in more detail in a later slide, but just want to make that point. In terms of the election timetable, if you've been through it before, this has changed a bit. So after each election, there's a government inquiry into the outcome of that election or the processing of that election. And the councils have been on and on to the government for years to try and increase the voting period. And finally, it's happened. So legislation got passed in 2023, it's come into effect last year. It finally extends the voting period from a miserable 22 and a half days out to 32 and a half days, which is good news. But the bad news is they've left the overall time expectation that the election will end on the second week in October, or the second Saturday in October. So as a consequence of that, the front end of the voting or the election period has been squeezed up. So we're talking about this nomination period opening earlier this time round. Normally those nominations would close in mid-August, about the 10th of August or thereabouts. This time round it's 10 days or thereabouts earlier. So just be mindful of that. One of the casualties of that is the third item there, which is this pre-election period. And I'm just going to note that because that's, and I'll refer to it again on the later slide, but that's when candidates have to start accounting for any campaigning costs that they come across. In the past, that always dovetailed in nicely with the opening of nomination period, but with the shuffle of these dates, that's now a bit odd in that the first week effectively doesn't have to be recorded, but we'll cover that off. So in terms of what I want to emphasise, really that 1st of August is the date I want you to just be focused on. So if you are going to put in a nomination, please make sure it's in by the 1st of August. We just can't move that date. And it's a horrible discussion to have with a candidate when they've not got the nomination form through to us in time, and we just can't accept it. So we'll cover that off shortly as well. The rest of those dates are pretty much as they would have been anyway, so they're covering more the results side of things. We'll cover that off again in a bit more detail in some later slides. But be aware that every candidate has to account for their election costs in due course, and so that last point on there is really when that needs to come in by. And again, we'll cover that off in more detail shortly. All right, so if you, Hamish has referred to these before, so these are the positions that are going to be available when we do make the final call for nominations. So the nominations start on the 4th of July, that's when the nomination period opens. Council will make some comms available leading up to that point through ads and papers, usually through social media, word of mouth, some posters around the place, etc. And there'll be some media releases basically calling for candidates that want to fill these positions. And yeah, those are the positions that are available if you are interested. All right, any questions on that part of it up to this point? I know I've whizzed through that, but I'm just mindful of the time. Okay, yep. I haven't got that in front of me, but there's certainly maps within the candidate handbook, and those are available here tonight if you want to take a hard copy away, along with the nomination forms, and they're available online. So plenty of resource there if you want to refer to them. Sorry, all right. So the nomination process itself. I want to just work through this slide in detail. So this is something to be aware of. If you want to be an elected member, then these are the candidate eligibility criteria you need to be aware of. Top one hopefully is reasonably self-evident. And the principal restriction is there. If you're in prison for more than 3 years, you'll be removed from the electoral roll, so you won't be able to get nominated anyway. But the other points are pertinent. So if you are intending to stand for Ashburton DC or Brader Rivers Community Trust, there is an opportunity. You can actually stand for multiple positions, but you can't also stand for ECAN. So you can't stand for a regional council and a district or city council within that particular regional council's boundary. And you can't have an interest with that council in a contract, either yourself or your partner, of 25,000 or more without getting audit office approval for that. Now that's not as easy a process to go through as you might be hoping. So if you are in that position, again, reference in the handbook about some contact details to get hold of somebody at the audit office to work through whether you would or wouldn't be restricted in that case, but just to be aware of that particular restriction. And you can't nominate yourself. So each nomination has to be supported by 2 other people other than the candidate. You can stand for multiple positions, particularly across the mayor, across the district council rather. And if you are elected to all of those positions, then there's a hierarchical withdrawal process that happens. So the results come out if you stood for the community board and the Western Ward and mayor, and you happen to be elected to all 3 positions, you'd be withdrawn from the community board, you'd be withdrawn from the council, you'd have to take the mayoral position. All right? And then those next highest polling candidates in those other positions come into office instead of you. You can stand if you don't live within the area, so the candidate themselves doesn't have to live within the area, except for the Brader River Community Trust issue. So they have a residential requirement. The candidate does have to live within the area, but council candidates don't have to. And if you're a council employee, you need to resign if you are elected. That won't apply to many of you. But you do need to be a New Zealand citizen, and you do need to be a parliamentary elector somewhere in the country. So those are on the nomination form as requirements, so to be aware of that. And you do need to be nominated by 2 people who are enrolled within the area that you want to stand for. So if you're looking to stand for the Western Ward, your nominators have to be enrolled with an entitlement to vote in that Western Ward area. If it's mayor, you just need to have 2 people that are on the council's roll somewhere. So whatever issue you are looking to stand for, your nominators have to be enrolled with a voting entitlement to vote for you in that issue. The bottom point, can't withdraw after nominations close. It's not quite true. You can, but only for medical reasons. So up to the close of nominations, you can withdraw. If there's a change of circumstances and you've got a new job offer or suddenly you don't think you want to be involved in the process, you can withdraw by just letting me know. I'll give you a form to fill out, relatively easy peasy. Your name comes off the website as a candidate, all that sort of thing. Once we've gone past that close of nomination date, midday on the 1st of August, the only way you can withdraw is through medical incapacity, needs a doctor's certificate to support it, needs a JP to sign your letter. Often you can't do it yourself, so you've got other parties that need to do that. It becomes a whole lot harder. So if anybody's thinking of withdrawing, just be mindful of that particular date. We hope you don't, but we need to make you aware of it. So with that in mind, sadly, if you want to be a candidate, there's some paperwork involved. And this is the process that you need to go through. So the nominations themselves open on the 4th of July, and as we noted before, they need to be in by the 1st of August, midday on the 1st of August. All your documents need to come in together, and each issue that you want to stand for, or each position you want to stand for, you need to complete a separate nomination form, pay $200 deposit, and furnish some of these other documents, such as that evidence of New Zealand citizenship and the profile, the candidate profile if you want to submit one, and the photo, and bank account evidence basically. So we'll go through that in a little bit more detail in the next slide. Forms are available, as I say, here tonight, the nomination forms in hard copy. You can download them from the council website and print them off yourself if you prefer. And they can come back, in this case, to Philippa and the team here in this building, or you can email them in. More people are finding that email is preferred option, but it's up to you as to how you want to bring them in. All I really want to emphasise is please don't leave it to the last minute. So the longer you leave it to lodge it, the more chance there is that there's no opportunity to fix any errors that might be in there. And if that's the case, if we're dealing with your nomination on the last day, the last 5 minutes, and you've got an invalid nominator, we can't give you an opportunity to go out and find somebody else because that closes at that time. Be aware, as Hamish indicated, that your candidate contact details will be made available on the website unless you choose not to make them available. But we will encourage candidates generally to make some point of contact available for people to be able to contact you. For organisations like that, Policy NZ to contact you, for any organisation that might be running an independent Meet the Candidates evening or something like that, they'll want to contact you. Quite often the first port of call is you'll hear from somebody trying to sell you something, some advertising space or some cardboard signage or something. I won't expect you to be able to pick that up, but this is just a quick overview of the nomination form itself. These are them here. 2-part page. As Hamish indicated before, because of safety reasons, we've now separated the candidate address, and that's on the back page of the nomination form. So the front page of the nomination form is a document of public inspection. Anybody, if they want to, can come in and pick those up and inspect them. Very few people do, but they have that right to if they want to. So the front part of the nomination form for council issues consists of 3 sections. And the first part of it is really just an acknowledgement that you are willing to be nominated, that you meet the criteria, and below that generally there's this I live in this area or I don't. A couple of tick circles. Section B is about the candidate details. So this is your email address and your phone number. Anything you put on that section will be made available on the website for people to make public contact with you. It'll also include some fields for things like the name you want to be listed on the voting paper as. So if you are commonly known in the community as something other than your given names, then there's an opportunity for you to list that name, and that will be the name that's listed on the voting paper for you, providing it's not confusing or offensive. Things like there's an affiliation field there as well. So if you want to claim an affiliation, you've got the right to do that. Historically, it used to be things like independent, or in some cases, some candidates associated themselves with certain political parties and wanted to show that affiliation. So if you're claiming a formal affiliation like that, some sort of formal group, you need to supply a letter of, or an email showing that you have the authority to claim that. So something from the group itself. Most of the bigger groups will give us that in advance anyway. And then the bottom part C is for your nominators to fill in. And this is their details. We won't publish their phone numbers or contact details, but their names will principally go up on the website, showing that they have supported your nomination. On the back page, that's where you put in your address. That's not part of the documentation that's made available for public inspection. We won't release that to anybody, but we need to know where you are to work out whether you are eligible to stand for certain issues. And again, if you choose not to put a public contact detail on that front page, this is where we need a private contact option so that we can ring you about results or anything that there may be going on that we need to get hold of you about. Profiles and photos. So this is an optional item. I'll show you how this fits together shortly, but most candidates will choose to put in a candidate profile and a photo. And these are the items that go into the little booklet that go out with the voting packs. I'll show you what they look like shortly. But there's some do's and don'ts here. I think the main limitation is they are limited to 150 words. So please be mindful of that. And we want them in a paragraph format ideally. So, and there's a restriction from the printer that we don't apply any bulleting or allow any bulleting of your particular focus points. Underlining, bolding, lots of things in uppercase letters and that sort of thing. So emphasis is on keeping it reasonably tight space-wise because there's a lot of these profiles go into the little booklets and these are the rules that we really want to follow. Ideally, we would like this in a Word document and emailed through to Philippa. So if you're coming in to lodge your nomination in person and pay the deposit in here, email her the day before or before you come in so that she's got your profile and your photo in an electronic format. What we want to do is pick that up and copy and paste your profile so we don't have to manually reproduce it. If we have to do the manual reproduce bit, that's where the errors come in and you might end up with an important sentence or something missed off. The photos need to be current, need to be of you only, basically. So don't send in your old rugby team photo and say that's me in the third row. We want something that we'll crop it back to a head and shoulder shot if required. So don't worry about that part of it, but it just needs to be a reasonable resolution. So don't just do a screen grab of your Facebook photo or something like that. We want a 2 or 3 meg file, ideally, that we can pick up and put into the printing software and it won't come out all pixelated when it hits the print press. All right, this is an example of how it comes out in the wash, so to speak. So in this case, this is Warwick, who I was referring to before. This is my colleague who's the electoral officer for some of the other councils that we are contracted by. In this case, this is a sample we've set up for Waitaki District Council. So we've said that in this case Warwick is standing for Mayor. And you can see there that it lists, or the booklet will be separated into these election issues. So there'll be a separate section for the mayoral issues. It says they're electing the mayor and then it lists his name. So given that you've only got a 150 word limit in your profile, don't waste the first sentence by saying my name is, because it's going to be there in the booklet. Below that, he's claimed that affiliation, and in his case, it's just a play on his surname. And so long as it's not offensive or too long, we will allow that sort of thing. So it can be just a tagline, that sort of thing. And then below that, we've picked up off his nomination form that he's also living in that particular area, and he's also standing for another position in this case. So he's opting to also stand for the local ward position as well. So we're just telling the candidates what else is pertinent about your particular nomination, and then below that is where that 150-word profile starts. So just to show you that we pick up some of that stuff from the nomination form, you don't have to include it in your 150-word profile. Candidate videos, Hamish covered this before. This is a fairly new initiative. I think in this case we're limiting it to the mayoral and council candidates, so not the community boards this time round and not the community trust candidates. But it is optional, and the idea is that this is an opportunity for you to participate in a relatively controlled environment where the lighting is consistent with every other candidate's lighting, and the audio is going to be the same, that sort of thing. So you're generally going to be answering 3 or 4 questions. You'll know what those questions are when the invite goes out to you after nominations close, and you can make a choice as to whether you want to come in and participate in that. So it's fairly successfully done in Tauronga's election, because they had to do their election last year. And of the few candidates that opted not to participate, when they saw the videos, most of them scrambled to see whether they then could get in on the action. So it's a fairly popular way of getting a message across. It's come about because of the constant criticism that some people have keep levelling, is that they can never find enough information out about candidates. This is an opportunity to present some different information other than your little 150-word profile about why people should vote for you and what you do, what you can do if elected. Well, we will set them in conjunction with each council, but they'll principally be the same as what Tauronga asked, because Tauronga's electoral officer is Warwick Land. But those questions will be in the invite email when they go out. If you want to see what those questions are, you can jump on Tauronga's website. They've still got them up there, and have a look. Yeah. So everybody has the same questions presented to them. All right, campaigning. So if you are going to do some campaigning, and most candidates do, you need to be aware of some restrictions. You can start any old time. So there's lots of candidates around the country that are hard at it now, and there's no restriction on that. But if you are going to do that, then you can't use council resources as part of that campaign process. And the main ones are council logos. In some cases, if they've got certain branding colours, etc., and you're trying to present your campaign material in that same colour, may come back to you and say, no, you'll need to change that slightly. And the other thing to be aware of is that social media channel, or channels. So those are council resources. I'll cover the social media side of it off later, but in your campaign material and in your campaigning process, just keep away from those. As candidates, you need to account for any cost that you spend on your campaigning, and we will send you a declaration form that you need to complete by that middle of December deadline, where you have to account for that, and this is where this pre-election period comes in. So I'll cover that in the next slide, actually, what those limits are, those costs are, but any material that you put out must have an authorisation statement on it. So any campaigning material, so that's videos if you're going to do them yourselves, any posters, even your Facebook account if you're using Facebook needs to have a declaration on there that you have authorised whatever material you've got on there. And there's some requirements there that used to be, had to have an authorisation statement itself, which is this is authorised by either you as the candidate or your agent, and then go on and list a private address that somebody could contact you or your agent at to discuss your campaign material. But that's now been modified, and so you can now just use an email address or a PO box number or a link to a website, provided somebody at that point of contact is there to let whoever's inquiring know where they can contact you at. All your campaign material has to be factually correct, so you can't just put any old thing out there. That's where the Advertising Standards Authority comes into play. So just be mindful of that. And that last point is fairly relevant too. If you're going to slag off other candidates, just be careful because they might turn around and sue you. All right, these are the expenditure limits that you can spend up to. I think the relevant point I want to focus on here, and it's sadly in fairly small print at the bottom there, is if you are going to spend money on campaigning, it's generally your money. There's no magical pot of money from the council that says, how much did you spend? Here, have it all back. So that comes out of your purse, and those are the limits that you can spend up to. They're all population based, so you can see that the community board, for instance, has a fairly light limit compared to somebody who was standing for ECAN or somebody like that, because the population basis is so much bigger. So just be aware of that. That's how much you can spend. Your declaration when you furnish it, that's one of the few sensibility checks I as electoral officer do. Check whether you have declared whether you have spent more than you're allowed. If you have, I have to send you to the police. If not, then they just go up and become available for public inspection. So again, this is some of the material that you need to be aware of. So that the period that you need to account for your expenses starts this year on the 11th of July. So the nominations themselves start on the 4th of July, but because of this election date reset, that first week isn't included in there. So you have to account for anything that is incurred from the 11th of July. You also have to account for anything that you have spent prior to or after that close of voting period that related to that campaign period. And common examples of that would be if you've got a website developed in February, for instance, got some photos taken, got the website set up, paid for that before that pre-election period started, but the value of that expense continues into that campaign period, then you need to do an apportionment of that cost. And the portion of that, or that part of the expense that covers that 3-month period from the 11th of July to the 11th of October. You also need to bring in, if somebody has donated some goods and services to you that exceeds $300, you need to bring in that as a cost to your election campaign. So it comes in as an expense in that case. And if it's a certain value, you also have to list it as a donation. I'll cover that off in the next slide. But just be mindful that most common thing is somebody will say, I'll do your website setup or something like that. So if they are donating that, then and you're not capable of doing that yourself, then that's deemed to be something that you need to account for so that your election costs are consistent with the other candidates. All right, so just be mindful of that. If you don't do any campaigning, you still need to put in a declaration, so just be mindful of that. We don't need to see your receipts and invoices. You hang on to those. We just put the declaration up on the council's website. That has to stay there for 7 years, and it's open for inspection by the public and by your fellow candidates, and some of them will opt to challenge it. So that's where your receipts and your receipts and your invoices come into play. You hang on to those. If anybody challenges you, then you can come back and furnish whatever you need to substantiate your claim or your return. I think that's reasonably straightforward, the rest of that. Donations, I won't cover this off in much depth because donations are probably less of an issue for, less of a factor for most of the regional council or the regional provincial councils. More a factor in the bigger urban areas, particularly if there's political parties at play. But be mindful that if you receive donations in cash or a monetary donation of more than $1,500, you need to list that on your declaration. And there's rules around trying to obscure who those donations come from. So they can't break them into smaller contributions and try and avoid that. If it's all come from the same source and it adds up to $1,500 more in value, you need to list who that donor is on your declaration. There's this thing about anonymous donations. Again, some people have tried it in the past because there's a section on the declaration form that says, did you get any anonymous donations? If they've come through in an electronic format, as in either to your bank account or to an agent's bank account, generally you can find out who that person was. So the expectation is that they can't then say, oh, that was an anonymous donation, don't list my name and address. Just be mindful of that. And the other thing is this business of donated goods and services. If somebody has given you several runs of donated time and materials, they may add up to that $1,500 value, and if that happens, they have to be included. More information in the handbook, so again, if you're in that boat, just be aware that donations do need to be accounted for over certain levels. Election signs, I'm not sure how prevalent they are in Ashburton, DC, but it is an option for you to advertise or campaign if you choose to. But be aware that if you're going to do that, election signage option, there's some rules around that, and again, listed in the handbook, so refer to that if you're thinking about using this particular process. As electoral officers, we just need to be satisfied that somewhere on your sign is an authorisation statement. And that's about where our control of the matter ends. If you stick a sign up somewhere where it's not allowed, that becomes an enforcement option, and the council enforcement staff might come back to you if they get complaints, ask you to take that sign down or shift it. So just be aware of these particular options there. I'm going to show you the other thing to be aware of in Ashburton's case is the time period that you can put them up. In your case, in Ashburton's case, it's reasonably generous. Effectively the full period, 11th of July to the 12th of October. Other councils will be way more restricted than that. So it just depends on the individual councils what those rules are. So look in the handbook if you're going to be thinking about that. Here's a couple of examples of some signage. The one on the right is not a good one as far as we're concerned because it's got an imitation voting paper in it. One on the left is a better one. Happily, they've both got that authorisation statement at the bottom. That's the bit that I have to be focused on because it's in the legislation, it's a requirement. But in this case, it's the old authorisation statement that somebody has listed their full address where they can find that candidate or their agent. Nowadays, it can be an email address, can be a phone number, something like that. This one is another example of a sign. Probably too honest. This was from a Tauranga election prior to their commissioners being appointed. This guy didn't actually want to be a candidate. He just wanted to stick his sign up, same with everybody else. So he did this, but he got such good feedback that when he finally got around to taking his sign down, he then went back to the electoral office and said, put my name down for next time, I want to be a candidate because, my sign's obviously doing the trick. He sadly didn't get that opportunity because the commissioners were then appointed in the next two election cycles. They never had elections. In his case, he did have an authorisation statement right down the bottom corner, which you probably can't see here, but we were happy with that. These ones aren't signs, but these are where the voting papers are going to come back to us from, so don't put your candidate campaigning material on any of our orange bins, please. So that one there hasn't got its branding on yet, but in due course they'll be labelled Ashburton DC voting bins or something to that effect that will make them stand out more. Social media. This is the theory, and I think probably the bottom, the highlighted section there is obviously one to be aware of, and also the bottom point. So the bottom point basically states what council's wanting to achieve through its social media channel, which is it's going to promote the election through that process, but it doesn't want to be seen to be promoting individual candidates. So you as candidates need to keep off council's resource, which is their social media channels. And over the page here, this is the practice of what the councils will do. So it's not just Ashburton DC, this will be happening nationally. If they see anything that has a hint of electioneering associated with it, they'll dump it for that election period. Because, rightly or wrongly, there could be a perception that if they leave it there, somebody's getting reward from throwing some information onto council's resource. So the bottom point, like the overall focus is stick to your own channels for your own campaigning, stay off council's resource and everybody will be happy. Bottom point there is a reasonably common one that we run into as well, where candidates will often, once they receive their voting papers, want to put some promotion out there encouraging other people to vote. So they'll mark their voting paper and then take a photo of it and say, look, I've voted, hurry up and get yours in the post too. If we can see how they have voted on that photo, then we have to get hold of that candidate and tell them to take that down, because potentially that's influencing other electors by displaying a completed voting paper effectively. So if you want to do that, encourage electors, just make sure you leave your voting paper in the envelope and display that. Election offences is not, I'm not going to go into any great detail, but the full list of those is in the handbooks if you really want to go into the weeds. But the things to be aware of principally is that treating one. This is the one that a lot of people get tripped up on, where if they are offering something of value as an inducement to vote, they're going to get in trouble. So don't go rushing off and printing off t-shirts or pens, these sort of things, irrespective of the value. If it has got a residual value, potentially you could get yourself into trouble if somebody else complains about it. So be aware of that. I get quite distracted by the unauthorised ads, so please be aware if you're putting ads in papers or on your Facebook page, etc., that needs that authorisation statement on there somewhere. All right, quickly just want to whiz through the electoral rolls. We noted before that one of the requirements for your nomination is that you've got to be supported by 2 nominators. Probably the best piece of investigative work you can do is check whether your nominators are actually on the electoral roll for the position you want to stand for. So people get other people in the household or just along the street to support their nomination document. They'll ask them, are they enrolled? Yes, they are enrolled. But when they get into council, it's not quite the case. So if you're thinking about it, maybe just whip in there, check whether the people that you want to get as your nominators are actually enrolled. Can be members in your household. If they are, then they should have recently received the Orange Man letter saying you're on the electoral roll. If your address is good, you don't need to do anything more. So that's usually a good indicator that they're enrolled. But just to cover it off, go and have a look on the electoral roll. If you want to buy a copy of the electoral roll, you can. We can only supply it in hard copy, so there's a fee there. $30 per award, or what is it, 80 for the full set if you want the full council roll. If you want a soft copy of that, you can apply to the Electoral Commission. They'll give you a file of the electors in your particular area. But there's a separate process for that. So details about that in the handbook if you want to go through that process. 2 flavours of electoral roll to be aware of. So the initial one is for the nomination period, and then we get a fresh supply of data from the Electoral Commission for the mail out of the voting papers. So anybody enrolling late will be on that later one. Voting process, again, sadly, it's still postal voting only, so we're stuck with the voting papers being mailed out. Good news is there's a slightly longer period for them to get it back to us. Bad news is that the time that NZ Post and DX, if they are mailing some of them, the time they've got to deliver them has been extended, so we think in some cases NZ Post will take longer to get those voting papers out to the electors. So again, if you're doing some campaigning, you probably want to think about having it out and about by that time when the voting papers are starting to hit the deck, which is 9th of September, those deliveries start. All right. Anybody that doesn't receive a voting paper can come into the council office here and apply for a special vote. Pretty much the same process as, or will look similar to your voting paper, but they also have to fill in the declaration that says, I haven't already voted, and there's a little bit of paperwork associated with that. Bottom point is just a relevant one. For perception's sake, you shouldn't be involved in collecting other people's voting papers. Encourage them to pop it in the mail themselves or drop it into the council office. It's just not a good look if people want to make a media issue out of a candidate picking up voting papers for other electors. All right, election results. We're getting reasonably close to the end of it now, but just to be aware that there are 3 flavours of election result that we'll release. First one on the Saturday is a progress result. That'll be about roughly 90% of the voting papers that we will process will be included in that. It won't include any voting papers that have been hand delivered to this office on the Saturday morning, and it won't include anything in those remaining voting papers in any orange bins that are out and about in the district. But the rest of it, somewhere around that 90% mark, will be processed and included in that progress result. But just keep in mind that if your result is reasonably close, that may change. So when we've got that remaining voting, or the remaining voting papers that have been delivered here on the Saturday morning, plus the orange bin stuff, which will probably be later on the Saturday afternoon, we'll process that on Sunday and we'll give you a preliminary result. Again, that'll go to Philippa in the first place. She'll distribute it to you. That's a firmer result. So that will be all the ordinary votes processed at that point, which will just leave the special votes. Again, that preliminary result is still not a final result, so things could potentially still change if there's a close margin in there somewhere. Just be mindful of that. But the final result will come out, we expect, on the Thursday following. It takes a while because part of that process is that some of those special votes have to get referred to back to the Electoral Commission to check whether those people are actually enrolled and have got the eligibility to cast that vote. If they have, we just pick them up and count them from there. So the counting part of that is easy. It's the validation that's the slow part. But once we do that final result, that's it. We declare who the elected parties are in that final declaration. And then beyond that, the only port of change is if somebody wants to apply for a recount. Again, information in the handbook about what that involves. It gets more complicated than you think. So for us, a close result that would warrant a recount is perhaps something in the 4 or 5 or below margin. Anything above that we've already pretty closely scrutinised and are reasonably confident when we release those results that they are accurate, but it's up to the individual. But you do need to go through the court to do that. You probably want to get a legal opinion to help you through that process, and you have to pay $750 to start the process. It's not just as simple as the result is close, I need a recount, or I think I should have a recount. you have to convince the judge that something has happened to make a mistake more prevalent in that particular set of results. We saw in the Gore election result last time round, there was a margin of about 7, I think it was. The mayoral candidate came second, applied for a recount, didn't specify why he thought the result was incorrect. The judge went through our audit process for the result generation and was satisfied that that didn't warrant a recount. So a margin of 7 wasn't accepted. Coming into office, so Hamish has covered this off. This is the governance side of things, so those that are elected will get contacted by the council staff and invited along to that inaugural meeting. You can't do anything officially until you've sworn a declaration. That's that swearing in term there. And the outgoing councillors or elected members, that's when they officially leave the organisation as well. So the new elected members replace the old, but they can't do anything until that first meeting comes into play. Resources, again, Hamish has covered this off, so I'm not going to go into great detail, but available in the handbook and in the slide. You can come back and check these resources out if you think you want more details about those. My recommendation is start with the handbook because it's reasonably detailed, has a lot of information in there. Right, my last slide. I realise that's a whistle-stop tour and I'm just mindful of how long we've been here, so I'm going to circulate for a little bit afterwards if you've got specific questions you want to put to me. Be mindful that Philippa is also here with her team, so if you've got any questions that you think about later in the day or later in the week, you can come back to either of us. Has anybody got any questions at this stage they want to raise about what I've covered off? No? Okay. Again, this will be available online. Happy to answer anything if you've got any questions that you do think of. What I do want to just say is thanks for coming along again, and if you are going to continue, good luck with your campaigns. All right.
No questions of Anthony. Last chance. There's one. Again, haven't got that specific figure. It was somewhere around 50 odd. Yeah, somewhere around 50-ish. Over 50%. So the national average was a bit less than that. So we had a better turnout here than the national average.
Yeah, that's generally influenced by your mayoral campaign. So if you've got a strong mayoral campaign, your participation rate generally goes up. Councils that don't have a strong mayoral campaign generally have a lower participation rate.
Okay. Thank you so much, Anthony, for your time. And I know there's a lot of material in there, and we thank you for giving us the guidance through it rather than the absolutely everything. But there is a lot of information in there. Anthony and his company are experts in elections. That's what they do. So as you decide around whether you're going to stand or not, and if you do, you get into it. If you're unsure about anything, then these are Anthony's there ready to help you through to avoid any of those sort of embarrassing mishaps that might occur in error. And Philippa has also been through a number of local government elections and can be a great source of guidance for you should you get involved. With those few words, just wrap it up. Thank you very much for your attendance and giving up your evening to come and listen. There's a mountain of information here for you, so please do get what you need from the table or online. Most of the stuff, if not all of it's online. We've got the note to circulate the presentation to those who wish to have that. So just if you can see Tony and let us know who you are and how we might email that to you, we can do that. And if you thought this was fun and want to do it again, then we're providing that opportunity next Tuesday in Methven and you're welcome to have a repeat, or if you're talking to somebody who you know couldn't get here tonight but was sort of expressing a little bit of interest, then please do encourage them to come to the Mount Hutt Memorial Hall 7 p.m. 7 p.m. next Tuesday evening in Methven, and we will talk to the community there about all the same things as we discussed today. Thank you so much for your time. We're all done. Thank you.